everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stuart Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. Today is a real treat. I get to visit with Lieutenant Colonel Alea Nadeem, an Air Force veteran and Republican candidate for Ohio's number 9th district, I believe. Hello and welcome. How are you, Colonel?
I'm good. I'm better now that I'm spending the day with you.
Oh, we were just chit-chatting before the show, and I'll tell you what, you have got your work cut out for you.
I do. Marcy Kaptur has been here. She's been the current Democrat incumbent. She's been here for 42 years. And we actually need to expose her really crappy record of voting like a liberal, even though this is a Republican district.
Whoa, 42 years in Congress. I wonder what her net worth is.
About $1 million, according to Open Secrets.
Oh, wow. So you can make money as a congressional person.
Apparently. So I think that's one of the things that bothers me the most is how do people go in with moderate incomes and come out as millionaires or even billionaires? And that's one thing I really do want to pledge. If I come out of Congress as a millionaire or billionaire, something is wrong with the system. Because I've been in the military. You know how much we make. We're not millionaires.
Not much. No, I grew up, my dad retired as Chief of Staff of the 8th Air Force, and we didn't know we were poor growing up. I loved being in the military from a family perspective because we traveled a lot. Now, it was terrible when Dad went to Vietnam. It was awful. We didn't know if an F-4 got shot down, if he was coming home or not. So we'd wait a week or two to hear from him. It was not like it is now. But let's get real serious about how you're going to win. You need money. How do people donate to your cause?
Well, first of all, thank you, Stu. So it's aleaforcongress.com, and you can donate that way. We actually take Bitcoin as well because we are supportive of those industries. And unfortunately, it takes resources to win, and it takes resources to beat somebody like Marcy Kaptur. So I checked the Federal Election Commission, and Marcy Kaptur has $1 million in her bank. So if you want to see a Republican seat. Yeah. So if you want to see a Republican in the seat, a veteran, somebody who's a servant leader, please go to aleaforcongress.com and make a contribution so we can beat her fair and square.
I like the way you think. Election integrity. I asked General Flynn, and it was pretty cool about that when I interviewed. His podcast just released this week, General Flynn.
I love that.
And he was like, oh, man, we got to get this fixed. And so this is a huge topic in Ohio. How are the election integrity programs going on up there?
Well, we're going through a redistricting right now. And part of it was the fact that in 2020, they couldn't agree on the lines, right? The legislator fought it and they sued. And so we actually have to do it by law. And what I'll tell you is if we redistrict Ohio 9 to make it more redder, more whatever you say, honestly, I want to go right now with the lines that we have, because it's already a Republican district. The president won this district by 6%. And R plus 3. That's huge. The same people who voted for Trump also voted for Marcy Kaptur because we didn't give them a quality candidate. And so when I've talked to people on the ground, even Democrats, they say, we want to get rid of her, but give us a quality candidate. Give us somebody. She's the devil we know. So I'm here to do the job myself. There's a joke. If you want a job done, send in a woman.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with that because I've been married to the same woman for 40 years. So we'll just leave that alone. But as we sit here, we make a joke about this. If President Trump carried the district by 6%, has he endorsed you yet?
No, Stu, not yet. And I would be honored to have the president's endorsement. And let me make my case to the president. President Trump, I think a lot of people previously, they just took your endorsement and didn't work hard. I'm not going to rest on just your endorsement. I'm going to work hard. I am not a show horse. I'm a workhorse because I believe in what you're doing for the country. As someone who grew up in Iraq, I see what you're doing. I see you, and I want to be part of that change. I really believe this is the time in history where it's going to make a difference. So I would be honored to earn his endorsement. And let's win this. Frankly, with his help, we can win this.
Wow. I like that. Sonny, you mentioned you grew up in Iraq. That's pretty incredible. How did you and your family get to the U.S.?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, to be honest with you. I was born in Toledo, Ohio, and I grew up to a Catholic mother and Muslim father. My father actually came over here to avoid conscription in Saddam Hussein's military. And unfortunately, this is really common in the Middle Eastern culture, is my dad ended up actually kidnapping me to Iraq. I was one of the first international kidnappings in Ohio. So my mother, along with the FBI, had to fight for almost 4 years to get me back to Toledo, Ohio. So when I grew up in Iraq from 8 to 11, I noticed what freedom is not like. I couldn't leave my house unless I had a male with me. I was scheduled to be married as soon as I started my menstrual cycle. I grew up in a war-torn country. And under Saddam Hussein, so when people say they hate America, they crap on our country, I say, just get out. You have no idea how lucky we are to live in this country. And so, as horrible as that experience was living in Iraq, it has made me unbelievably grateful for this country. And it's one of the reasons I joined the United States Air Force after 9/11, because the same country that rescued me asked me to come serve. And how could I not? So it's been the greatest
Wow.
honor of my life to serve this country. And it'll never be enough because, Stu, I'm talking to you today because this country cared enough about me to rescue me. Think if I was in Iraq, that'd be happening? No.
Wow. That's cool. I'll tell you what, I'll give you my endorsement right now. But let's sit here and ask you a few questions, though. Let's say you had an energy bill and that you had to vote on, and you sat back and said, well, wait a minute. What if I don't know anything about energy? How would you handle that bill?
There's a lot of things that I don't know about, but I think it's really important to surround yourself with people who do know. So you may be a first phone call to get your opinion on it. So it's surrounding yourself by people who know it and asking the question and being humble enough to figure it out. And also, we have to unleash our energy here in America. Right? We have got to stop this whole thing. Let me get on this kick about the green energy. I'm not saying I want to destroy the earth or anything like that, but we have to be realistic, right? EVs and windmills aren't it. And I always tell about like these EVs, green vehicles. Do you know what it takes to mine those materials? It's just as dangerous and it's just as bad. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have to have the future of energy, which I actually believe is nuclear. And I'll tell you, the Navy, has nuclear energy and people sleep next to it and their submarines. Like we can figure this out. We put a man on the moon. We can do this.
For our podcast listeners, the Colonel and I are sitting here, and I kind of threw that question at her with no prep, and I'm impressed. So I said, what are you going to do about energy? I didn't say anything else. We didn't talk about this. I haven't prepped her on any of that. And I'm very impressed with your answer on that because Secretary Chris Wright is the best energy secretary we have ever had. And you have Doug Burgum for the Secretary of the Interior and Lee Zeldin. They are the three horsemen of the energy dominance apocalypse. Without those three gentlemen running on all cylinders, we won't be energy dominant. And I loved your answer, by the way.
Energy, I always say, not only energy dominant, but energy independence, right? We're able to go back into Alaska and drill, which, those senators have always been champions of that. And we have enough resources here and we have to be smart about it. So I'm actually excited for that area. It is not my specialty by any means, but I acknowledge what you just said about the three horsemen trying to change this around for us.
Isn't that cool? I'll tell you what, we would love to be a resource. And that's what I offered to General Flynn on his staff and everything else is we love being a resource to be able to pull in other people. We pull in a lot of experts in order to get a question answered. So this is a lot of fun. Where do you see your biggest challenge other than getting President Trump to be able to say, hey, Colonel Nadeem is my go-to person for this district? What other things are huge roadblocks for you right now?
Well, the unfortunate part is money.
Wow.
I mean, to be honest, I hate that, right? I hate that that's the answer. But if you don't have enough money, you can't get your message out to your constituents.
Right.
And so when you have somebody like Marcy Kaptur, who's been entrenched for 42 years here, and she has $1 million in her bank, how do you fight that?
Right.
It is hard to fight that. So you have to be able to raise those resources. And it gives me no pleasure to call people and ask for money. And, it's funny when I call it dialing for dollars, I call, national donors who are great Americans who support Republican candidates. I start off with, I need your help. and I'm not independently wealthy. And I know you believe in Republican principles. So I get no pleasure in doing this. So if you help me out, we're going to be able to hold the house. And so that's what I do a lot of my days, is asking for people for contribute to conservative values.
Wow. This is cool. Now, what's the website again?
It's Alea for Congress.com. So ALEA for Congress.com. And you can donate there. And we also take Bitcoin because we support those industries and we believe that they're going to be the future.
No, I hate to bring that up again and say, hey, what's your website again? Because it is really important. I understand the money game. It is really sad. That was one of the biggest things that I got out of General Flynn's advice was we all have to get involved locally. And you are doing exactly what General Flynn said. And that is, if it weren't for, going forth, I would go do it as well, but I'm having way too much fun being a podcast host. But
well, you're good at this. You're doing your parts too. So we know you don't need to do that. You're doing a great job right now. We need you here.
There you go. But we're having fun. And when you sit back and take a look, how are you going to handle going up and down the halls of Congress when you've got knuckleheads in Congress, some of the antics going there? I'm going to assume, being a colonel in the Air Force, you've put up with some knucklehead things around the world. You wouldn't have any problem with knuckleheads walking around Congress.
First of all, I would not get lost because I previously worked for Congress. I was a military legislative liaison, so I walked the halls of Congress. I was a liaison to the Appropriations, Budget, Finance Committee. So day one, I know how it works. You're going to get somebody who goes, bingo. I know. I've already been on the House floor. Actually, I did the State of the Union for the president. I've done the inauguration. So number one, I just want everyone to know I'm not going to get lost. I know my way around. And then number two, we talk about knuckleheads, right? There's a lot of knuckleheads there. And that's part of the reason why I'm in here. I like to call myself a quiet assassin. I've always gotten the job done, no matter how hard I've changed policies. You know what I do it? I like to go back and close doors and have conversations the old school way. And then you come out better. I don't need to fight you in public. I don't need to be super loud. I can make changes over breaking bread or a meal. So I think I have a different approach. My approach has been very successful. I mean, I've changed some huge policies in the United States Air Force, even in our country with the VA. I actually championed a program for women who were transitioning because some of the service women had higher rates of suicide. And we were trying to figure out how to do that. So I was actually able to go forward and ask some representatives to champion that legislation. And we got it done. But it wasn't because I was making loud noises. I was having quiet conversations behind closed doors with both parties. And that's the reality. You have to be somewhat pragmatic and you have to keep your agenda moving forward.
Interesting. As you go through and champion those kind of things, some of those things are going to be very controversial as you challenge some of those things going forward. There is a loss of appetite for some of those things, if that makes sense.
It does. And part of the reason is because that stuff went so far, right? The pendulum had swung so far where things got so crazy in our government. So let's touch on this a little bit. So when I was in the Air Force, I was active duty up till 2 years ago, DEI stuff, right? The pendulum swung so hard where, things that I was advocating for example, like having ballistic vests that fit the biological anatomy of a female, right? They lump that all into DEI. And it's like, that's not DEI, that's readiness. And so because the pendulum swung so far, people don't have an appetite for that stuff. But right. If we can get the numbers in Congress, we can do whatever we want, right? Like we can move this agenda forward. So once we have a lot more numbers, hopefully we can, I don't know if we'll ever get to 60 in the Senate Republicans, but we're going to be able to hold Congress and get the president's agenda completed.
That's a huge issue in trying to get President Trump's agenda. I am very tired of the uniparty and the rhinos. So in fact, I even said on the interview with General Flynn, I said, I am not identifying as a Republican. I identify as an American first. And if you don't vote American first, really don't want your to participate. So that's pretty high on my outlook. I do not feel that we should have dual citizens in Congress. I think dual citizenship is not a good thing.
No, because who is your loyalty to? How can you be America first? I've actually seen a couple videos in Minnesota. There's a current representative advocating. And one of the things that I heard them say was, how they're going to help Somalia. And I said, what? This dog don't hunt. You're in America. Yeah, like this makes no, like America first. Like I'm really proud of my heritage of being Iraqi, but I'm an American. My loyalty is to this flag, and people have forgotten that. So I do think that's a problem. And listen, as a professional intelligence officer who has national secrets, I can't have dual citizenship either. So why should a member of Congress have dual citizenship who could potentially have access to all that information?
Doesn't sound good to me. I mean, you sit back and kind of wonder, having also foreign interest groups that are not registered as influencing folks, we have ballpark 96% of our Congress is funded by a certain country. I'm all for that country, but that's not what we need to have influencing our decisions. That's a huge one.
It is really big, right? Because you have this group that's influenced it. And let's talk about it, right? Like fully support Israel. And part of the reason is when I was deployed, and when we were working to fight ISIS, they were a phenomenal partner in that. But to your point, we are America first, right? There has to be an allegiance and loyalty to what is best for America, and everything else is secondary. And so that's one thing to me that I really learned in the military. We fight for America. We're not fighting for anybody else. And so I really do want to get back to that. I hope we get back to that. I hope we have members who really are serious about America first. And you touched on rhinos. And this is what I think is happening, Stu. I think it's a generational thing. You had these old, I would call them the old Republicans, but it's a generational thing. They weren't really doing the things that they needed to do. And so the party moved. And it's a legacy. They're still holding on. But I really do think the party has shifted where we're getting rid of, there's no place, unfortunately, for rhinos anymore because we have to get stuff done and we don't have time for that.
We have months instead of years. If we don't get our nuclear reactors rolling, we won't make it. I mean, so it's pretty simple. You got to get those regulations out there. And I like the way you're thinking through this. I did not have on my bingo card that John Fetterman would actually have a stroke and then come out to be the most intelligent Democrat that they've got now. I did not have that on my bingo card, and that man's a hoot now. When I can remember seeing him when he goes, I hate fracking. I frack. I believe in frack. I mean, that man couldn't even speak. And now he's the most articulate guy they've got. This is nuts. I did not see that coming.
Well, I think you see it coming in the sense he represents Pennsylvania.
He represents his people, and I'm okay with that.
Yes, it's a huge energy. I mean, Pennsylvania, think about it. It's also I would say it's probably a red purple, state. So he has to do that. There's no other option for him. So sometimes this transcends party lines, like what you said, America first. I think he's doing America first. I don't even know if it's politics because I don't know if he would stay in power if he wasn't making the choices that he was making or saying some of the things. And actually, he's actually doing it in his vote as well, which is the really more important thing.
Right. Well, I tell you, this is kind of fun when you sit back and think. Pennsylvania is the home of the Marcellus, and there's some great oil and gas companies. I've interviewed some folks up there, and we need to unleash the Marcellus in Pennsylvania hugely. And I'll tell you right now, the net zero energy policies of New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, all that area are just doing nothing but causing increases in energy costs. It is a huge problem up there because you can't get any more pipelines built. Pipelines are critical infrastructure that need to be built.
And Stu, when people put out these things about net zero, there is no net zero. everything is made by oil, gas. Like if we took all that away, we
Right.
couldn't survive. Like we couldn't make it. Trains couldn't run. So it's just that their head is like pie in the sky, and we have to be realistic about energy. And I tell this story, and it's a little cheesy, but just hear me out. Is, when we talk about back in the day, people used to go catch whales so they could get the oil. Right. That was how they got oil. And I remember there was a time where people said, "Hey, there's this new oil coming out of the ground." And people were like, "There's no oil coming out. That's not going to work." And they were just they couldn't believe it. And then now we have oil. We need the next evolution of that, right? So before you say oil is all bad, well, then how are you going to live? It's the same people driving Teslas where I just want to put a sticker that says, like coal mine, right? Or it's not realistic. And maybe it makes you feel good to drive, an EV. But at the end of the day, you're burning the same amount of energy. So net zero does not work. It's just not realistic.
You and I have not met before this call. We have not teed up any of your answers, and I've not given you any of my questions, and you answered that one very nicely. Oil saved the whales the first time. And I think oil will save them the second time with all of the right whales dying off of the East Coast because they put all these wind farms right in the middle of it. And Secretary Burgum just put out a announcement that he wants the eagles saved because of the thousands and thousands of bats and birds that are killed by wind farms. We, in the oil and gas space, we get hammered over a lizard that there's billions of lizards around there, and they say it's an endangered species, and I step on 19 of them within a foot. It's kind of really ridiculous, but you get to kill, the wind farms get to kill all the eagles they want, but a farmer protecting his sheep or his flock goes to jail. It is a double-edged sword out there, and you answered that one pretty entertainingly.
Well, I didn't think about this, the saving of the whales the second time, and the eagles. I'm gonna have to steal that. That's a good
Please
one.
do.
But I think you put it into perspective. Like, let's just be realistic. And people have said, like, you hate the environment. No,
No.
not at all. I love the environment. Teddy Roosevelt's one of my favorite presidents because of the national park system. Like, I go to the park every day. I love that. That's not what we're talking about. But you just have people's head is not in reality. And I agree, we need a better way. We'll move forward. And so, no, I'm glad I didn't know your answers, because this is just how I think, and this is how I feel about it.
The one of the fun things is this is not like mainstream media. We are, like I had said before, we're past 19 million transcripts read this year. We're at 2.4 million downloads or listens on the podcast. That doesn't even include the YouTubes or the Twitters or any of that other kind of stuff. So we sit back. We are not like mainstream media that edits like Kamala Harris, boy, or Joe Biden. What you see is what you get here.
And why should you? Right? I mean, I think that's what gives you the freedom. Why should you edit those things? And I think that's why you're seeing an uptick in your viewers, but also why people are enjoying podcasts more. People don't trust the news anymore. They don't, there's always going to be an opinion. And so this is where people are actually getting their information. I get tons of friends who send me podcasts now versus news clips because people just don't trust it. It's going to be one, either edited or clipped, where you're not going to be able to get your full answer out. So thank you for giving people opportunities to get their whole answer and context out there.
Well, thank you. And I've been discussing some things with some folks that are of the left persuasion there, and I invite them on the podcast. Come on, guys, you want to throw some false numbers out there? Let's get on a podcast, record it, and you prove what you're saying. So it's kind of fun to be able to have the platform to be able to say that kind of stuff. So again, what was the website?
It's aleaforcongress.com, ALEA for Congress.com. And if you believe in Republican conservative values and not rhinos, please make a contribution, because I'm going up against the longest serving Democrat woman of 42 years in the history of the U.S. House of Representatives. She's got $1 million in her bank, and we've got to unseat her. She actually voted, by the way, she voted for the Green New Deal, which this is how crazy it is. Northwest Ohio is the hub of manufacturing. She was actually trying to put these businesses out. She came with all these EV programs, green programs that don't work here. And so I tell people, how could you vote? How could you continue to elect her? She voted for the Green New Deal, taking your jobs away. And Ohio, since 1983, since she's been here, has lost 400,000 manufacturing jobs.
Ooh.
So if you get a report card to say like how have I been doing with keeping jobs, she gets an F. How does she stay elected?
Well, AOC is right up there with her as well, too. When AOC cost all the folks the jobs from Amazon, I believe, as well, too. I believe we used to, in World War II, Ohio, the district was a major manufacturing hub.
And it is. Guess what we make? We make the Jeep.
Yeah.
So Toledo, Ohio makes the Jeep. It made it during all World War II. And the Jeep plant is still here despite her. Right. And that's the thing, it's despite her that, we still have manufacturing. We used to be called the Glass City, which we still are. Libby Glass is here. So we are a hub of manufacturing here. But over the years, she voted for policies to send those jobs over to Mexico, China, her own policies. And so you mentioned AOC. AOC's from New York. That is something I expect somebody from New York to do, not somebody from Ohio at the heart of the working class people. That's where I'm shocked. And actually, one of the things that I'm really trying to advocate for is switching the unions. So this particular area that I'm in is very union heavy. It's one of the most heavily industrialized areas overall, and the unions really started here. But what you're starting to see is the line employees of the union start to vote red because the Republican Party is the working class party now. And I ask people, what have the unions done? What has this current representative done for the unions? Now, there's some unions I'll never agree with, like the teachers union. Those have to go. That's a no-brainer. But my mother and my sister were electricians, and they're in the union. That's going to make sense to me. So I'm trying to eat into her lunch with the unions because she has not brought jobs back here.
Wow. Well, now, have you gotten any of the unions to back you yet?
No, they're scared. They're scared to go against her because they've supported her for 42 years. But you know what? They may be scared to publicly, talk to me, but I think you're going to earn their votes. The same people who voted for Trump are the same union folks who maybe quietly, which is more powerful, to be honest. Your vote is more powerful than anything. And so we're starting to see the unions flip. So I think we have a really good opportunity in 2026.
Who's your biggest union? And I'd say go get a meeting with that union boss, right?
We're working it. We are working it. But Stu, this is the reality. People are maybe a little bit intimidated to meet with a Republican, right? So we have to have quiet conversations.
Okay, this goes back to your the way that you like to do business, and the only segment that is actually I don't even watch Fox News that much anymore, but Brett does have the Uncommon Ground segment, and that could be your Uncommon Ground type segment there. I would interview Fetterman in a heartbeat just because he does seem to have more care about his constituents. And I'm going to put a bet that it would not surprise me if he showed up on the Republican doorstep someday, because I think the Democrats may run him out someday.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, I've worked with Senator Fetterman when I was on the, Senate floor. We worked some things because of his attire. But you know what? He's a gentle soul, and you can tell that he actually really does care about his constituents. And I'd say, hey, Senator Fetterman, why don't you come on Stu's show in your hoodie, and maybe you can make an announcement that you're going to come over to the Republican side. We'll welcome you.
There you go. That would be actually pretty fun. And it's like Leader Modi for India. I have not faulted Leader Modi for he's elevated so many people out of energy poverty by doing what's best for India. And I think that there's only just a couple things that I've ever disagreed with President Trump, and that is how he's listening to people on the Russia side of things, because I think that President Putin actually did an outstanding job when he showed up in Alaska. He came ready to do a deal. He brought all these business leaders with him, and he said, I'm here to do a deal. They have maxed out their oil production, and they need oil energy dominance as an export service. They actually need our expertise to go increase their oil production. If President Trump went to do business with Putin, he'd end the war. That's my opinion. But when we take a look at where Modi is going, President Trump putting the extra tariffs on India was a mistake. And I think that President Trump and I think that Modi has done more by buying cheap Russian oil to get his people out of poverty and is doing what's best for India. We need to just realize sanctions don't work. All it does is move people away from the US dollar.
Yeah, I mean, also you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I think, my perspective on this may be slightly different from a national security perspective. So I think, Modi is India first. So he's going to get that energy, right? You can't fault him for that. I think in terms of negotiating, I am really proud to see our president and Putin talking. Like, the fact that we have two people who came to Alaska to talk, I like that stuff. I'm a big fan of like conversations change the world and the trajectory of things. So I do like that. I think they're going to strike a deal. And I think the president is looking at it as a national security issue, right? You have diplomatic, you have energy, you have economy. There's all kinds of ways. So I think he's using that lever. Now, will it pay results? I don't know. And I think he's trying to use the military option, or I think he's trying to avoid writing Ukraine a blank check. I mean, we have to be honest about this. We've spent almost as much in Ukraine that we've spent in the Afghanistan wars that were, Afghanistan, Iraq, which were over 20 plus years. That's how much we're spending. So the fact that he's trying all these different things, I can live with that versus putting boots on the ground, having a war and just us depleting our, checking account.
No, our military does not need to be doing that. His strike on the Iranian nuclear sites was phenomenal. Loved it. Absolutely no boots, and what heroes our Air Force did on that. The bombs going in the same hole and having those huge bombs going in and not having them detected. I loved having the B-2s going to Asia and going off to Guam and everything else as a diversion. Then the other ones out of, I believe it's Whiteman, were going the other way. So you got to love the Air Force and the planning on the whole bomb thing. That was absolutely out of the park huge.
Yeah, Operation Midnight Hammer. Listen, if you want the job done, call the Air Force, right? Like we're precise. Like we don't miss our mark. I will tell you that. We're good at that. And we've been preparing for this. This wasn't this is what I want to tell. This is what the military does. Where everyone's sleeping at night, thinking about what they're going to eat the next day for breakfast. This is what we do. We plan things, because we have to plan for the bad day that's going to happen. And that was a bad day for Iran. And I'll tell you this, I had family members killed by Iranian Shia militia groups in Iraq. So I have to tell you, here's my bias. I was not sad at all to see what had happened. I thought for once we're going to get regime change in Iran, but I don't think we're there yet. But it was a very joyous day for me, because that country needs to have some parameters. They're one of the reasons why the Middle East is so destabilized.
Right. And that, well, I'll tell you, we have run out of time here, but I thank you very much for your time, Colonel. And I really appreciated getting to get to know you. What's the website again?
Stu, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you, to be honest. My website is aleaforcongress.com, ALEA for Congress.com. I would be honored to get your contribution so I can fight for conservative values and flip this seat red once and for all.
And President Trump, please reach out to her and tell her that Stu sent you, so that you could at least visit with her and say, hey, I would love to hear that President Trump interviews you to say, I would give you a recommendation. I would be all in if he did do that. That would be pretty darn cool.
And I would have you to thank, Stu. So, and Stu, why don't you come with me during my interview? So President Trump, I would be honored if you wanted to interview me. We'd have a good time, if anything else.
Oh, I think it'd be an absolute hoot. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Stu. Appreciate it.